Ever wonder why your child's meltdowns feel like they hit out of nowhere? Like 1 minute everything's calm and the next you're facing an emotional explosion. Maybe over the blue cup or brushing teeth, or maybe even just the sound of a sibling chewing. Today, we're getting to the bottom of it. In this episode, I'm sharing what's really behind those meltdowns, and more importantly, how you can turn those overwhelming moments into opportunities for connection. Ready to stop feeling helpless and start feeling confident? Let's dive in and tackle those meltdowns together. Welcome to Calm Connection Parenting. I'm your host, Jamie Kirkbride, mom of 7, parenting coach, professional counselor, and wrangler of big emotions. If you're raising a highly sensitive child with intense emotions or challenging behaviors and wondering if you'll make it through without losing your mind, you're not alone. Around here, we're all about real-life parenting, sprinkled with a little humor and a whole lot of patience. So grab your coffee, trust me, you'll need it, and join me as we explore tips, stories, and faith-based strategies to help you bring more calm and confidence into your chaotic days. Let's do this. All right, let's start off today by clarifying the difference between tantrums and meltdowns, because yes, there are some differences. Tantrums, I would say, usually happen when a child wants something, like a toy or a snack, and they're frustrated because they're not getting it. You know the scenario. They're flailing, screaming, maybe some dramatic flops to the floor. But tantrums are typically about control. And as a parent, you've probably noticed that they tend to resolve themselves when the child either gets what they want or realizes that they just aren't going to get it after all. But meltdowns are different. In fact, they're a whole different ballgame. Meltdowns come from overwhelm. Your child isn't thinking, I want that toy. Instead, they're probably feeling bombarded with all of the noise that surrounds them and too much sensory input and too much emotional overload and frustrations building, and they're hot and they're hungry. And well, for children who are more sensitive or who have unique wiring, this overload can happen quickly and often unexpectedly. It's like going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat. So if you're seeing more intense emotional responses where your child seems like they're no longer in control of their actions, that's more likely a meltdown. And guess what? Meltdowns aren't necessarily about misbehavior. I know, now stick with me. They're usually a cry for help from a child who doesn't know how to cope with what they're feeling, don't know what to say, or maybe even what to do. Visualize what that might feel like in the adult world. You know, this is a helpful strategy that I use a lot when I'm working with my parents in the coaching program. And I encourage them to think of a situation in your life where you would feel totally overwhelmed. Cast it into your world. So let's pretend you're driving home in a rain and hailstorm, and the radio's too loud, and the child in the far back seat is crying. The child in the middle seat is waking up the once sleeping baby who's now crying. The wipers are loudly swishing back and forth, and yes, that annoying squeak as it cleans the windshield. The child behind you is pushing with his feet on your seat from behind and incessantly repeating, "Mom, Mom, Mom." And despite your answering him, he continues. And the car in front of you that you could barely see for all the rain and hail that's coming at you just hit their brakes. Now, some of you are probably feeling severely anxious just thinking about it or just hearing it. Now, imagine if you looked in that moment and someone just said to you, "Oh, don't feel stressed. Calm down. You're just fine." Tell me this, are you feeling fine? No. Well, that's what it's like when we look at our melting down child who has his equivalent of this scenario in his world, and we say, stop crying, calm down, you're fine. Yeah, that brings kind of a different meaning to it, kind of a different feel. And this is the first strategy I would really encourage you to use, is to try to cast situations in your world that may be equivalent, whether it's with a friend or a spouse or sometimes even a boss, can help you envision the stress your child might be feeling in their world. Now, let's talk for a minute about the underlying causes of meltdowns. What's really causing the meltdown anyway? Well, there could be several underlying factors at play. For some kids, it may be anxiety. They may be overwhelmed by social situations or changes in routine, or maybe even just new experiences. Kids with ADHD can have poor impulse control, making it harder for them to manage their emotions, which can lead to these outbursts. Kids with DMDD, or maybe even some of those on the autism spectrum, often struggle with unexpected changes or even sensory overload, which can trigger meltdowns in these kiddos as well. And let's not forget about those learning disabilities. Children with undiagnosed learning challenges may feel extreme frustration when they just can't keep up with tasks, or they look around and other kids are doing things that they're struggling with, and that can lead them to those same emotional explosions. Understanding that your child's meltdowns are not just random acts of defiance, but responses to deep internal struggles helps shift how we as parents approach these meltdowns. And I like to remind my coaching clients of this. Your child is not giving you a hard time. He is having a hard time. And that really shapes the way that we approach them and then respond to them. You know, there's this short, simple sentence that I think is a great mantra. In fact, in the mom world, I like to refer to them as momtras. Anyway, this one's a game changer, and it's simple. It's just 4 simple words. All behavior is communication. Don't ever forget that. And how I wish I had known that when I first started parenting, because I can tell you this, I would have done a lot of things differently. Many children who have frequent meltdowns are actually communicating. And often they're communicating a need. They may need help regulating or solving problems, help communicating, or learning a lagging skill. They're not equipped with the tools needed to do this all on their own. And some kids may even need more direct instruction for things that other kids just pick up on. When a child throws a tantrum or has a meltdown, it's often because they lack emotional regulation skills. They may not know how to calm down when they're upset, or how to ask for what they need in a healthier way. And it might not be that they won't calm down. It might actually be a matter of they can't calm down. A good analogy is this. How would you feel if you walked into work one day and your boss handed you a toothpick and he asked you to hang this very heavy picture on the wall? Now, short of a hammer or something that was at least a little heavier and sturdy, you would struggle. And no amount of urging from your boss or threatening your pay or taking away vacation is going to help you use that toothpick to hang the picture, right? You need the right tool to do the job. And oftentimes that's what our kiddos are running into with these big and extreme emotions. But here's the good news. You, as a parent, are the primary person who can help your child by understanding their lacking skills or the things that they're needing help with, and then help them learn and build those things. Maybe it's through practice. Maybe it's that direct instruction. but you have certain things that you can control. And let me tell you this, you can't control your child. You control the tone of the situation. You control what you bring to the situation. You control your mood. You control your own emotional regulation, and you control what they can expect from you. You can only control you. Kids learn how to handle their emotions by watching us. Now that can feel like a lot of pressure, right? But it's also empowering because it means that we as parents actually have the power to model calm behavior, to model emotional regulation, to model asking for what we need, even during the stormiest of meltdowns. When you model staying calm, you show your child that big emotions, intense emotions, don't have to control us or lead to chaos, those big, huge eruptions. Your ability to regulate your emotions may actually be the most important part of helping your child regulate their emotions. So let me encourage you, model what it is that you want to see. Well, but this is where some people say, aren't meltdowns and tantrums just a learned behavior? Well, that's something we need to consider. Are meltdowns or tantrums a learned behavior? Sometimes, especially with tantrums, kids might learn that if they scream long enough or hard enough or loud enough, they'll get what they want. And that can tend to look like manipulation for survival. They're trying to figure out how their world works. And that might be why we need to handle tantrums slightly different. But tantrums and meltdowns may become a pattern that we need to break that cycle. And this doesn't mean that we go about ignoring your child's needs. It actually means we need to give them the tools necessary to express their emotions in a healthier way. We're going to talk about how to respond to tantrums, meltdowns, these challenging behaviors in just a moment. But first, this message. Are your child's emotions and challenging behaviors pushing you to the edge? You're not alone. From constant struggles to emotional outbursts, it's easy to feel like you're just one step away from chaos. But what if I told you there's a better way? In the Calm Connection program, you'll get access to a video course, workbooks, and a supportive community to learn practical, faith-based strategies for handling even the toughest of behaviors. But the best part, you get weekly coaching calls with me, where we can explore your child or family's specific struggles and work together for some solutions. If you're tired of trying methods that just don't work, or you feel like you don't have time to add one more thing to your plate, don't worry. This program was designed to fit into a busy parent's life and give you real solutions with some quick wins too. Ready to take the first step toward a calmer home? Visit calmconnectionparent.com and learn more about the Calm Connection coaching program. You've got this, and I'm here to support you. So how do we respond to these meltdowns and tantrums? How do we respond in the moment? The key here is to stay calm and consistent. Don't give in to the tantrum by just handing over the toy or letting the behavior slide. Instead, practice acknowledging the emotion, but hold firm on the boundary. For example, I know you're really upset because you want that toy, but we're going to wait and share right now. Should we set the timer? And then your child learns that you're expecting the behavior of sharing. They can't have the toy right now, but there's an appropriate time for them to have what it is that they need. And then when that 5 or 10 minute timer goes off and you trade the toy, they learn that you follow through and they can still get their needs met in appropriate ways. By calmly setting expectations and offering empathy, you're actually teaching your child that their feelings are valid, but they don't have to use their behavior, their screaming, their crying, their tantrum to control the situation. So sometimes in these situations, you may choose to ignore a behavior and maybe move through with redirection. So maybe they're fighting and upset because they want that toy. Perhaps you sit down and say, hey, you know what? What if we read a book together? It might be that redirection is just enough to snap them out of it and move on. It might be that you figure out a different plan. You know what? There's something I was thinking of doing with you today, but I know you're really wanting to play with that toy. How about this? Let's share. In 5 minutes, we'll swap the toy, but until then, let's you and I play ball together. Or maybe you help them just through the emotion of being sad, mad, or frustrated. Maybe the dialogue sounds like this. You know what? You sound very mad. Sharing is hard, isn't it? You know what? It's okay to be mad, but it's still really good to learn to share. Is there something I could do to help you while you're feeling mad? Would reading a book help? In this way, we acknowledge the emotion and help them move through it. We're showing them how to problem solve instead of using the tantrum. Now, I have to tell you, with meltdowns, you might have to move much, much slower. It's a longer process and will likely require you to use less words, less force, and less demand. Why? Because when your child is already dysregulated, they are not able to reason at this point. Their system is likely already on overwhelm or stuck in that perceived threat response. And that is why it's so important that you learn to deal with your child's meltdowns in a different way. There are some key things you need to understand, to know, and then consistently use. And don't worry, we'll be covering all of those in future podcasts because there's some great strategies I can't wait to share with you. And yes, if you're wondering, those are also part of the Calm Connection coaching program, where we use the step-by-step iHeart approach to learn how to walk through these meltdowns, these challenging behaviors, the intensity that we feel with our children. And the reason I love it so much is because not only are these strategies, the step-by-step approach, good for children who are highly sensitive or emotionally intense, they work great with every child. It sets us up to respond to our children in a healthy, loving, and faith-based manner. And I know for so many families, you've been looking for tools like that. So stay tuned in here to this podcast, and I'm going to share more and more of those tips and tools along the way. But back to this highly sensitive child and those meltdowns. Now, some children with this unique wiring are diagnosed with mental health issues, but others may not be. So they're often considered highly sensitive kids. They may thrive on routines. Why? Because predictability can oftentimes bring comfort and control. When a child feels so easily out of control internally, they may often express a greater need to control things externally. In other words, when they can't control their emotions, they may really, really fight to control the situation or the circumstances that they face. When your child knows what's coming next, they're less likely to feel overwhelmed. Establishing a daily routine with clear transitions can reduce the frequency of meltdowns because you're removing the uncertainty of unexpected things that triggers those big emotions. This is one of the reasons why it's so important that we use transitions. When you're ready to maybe share something they don't want to share, when you're ready to leave a place they really would rather stay and play, when you're ready to load into the car, when maybe you have to move from an activity of high preference to low preference. Learning to give them that preparation, because for so many of these kiddos who struggle with meltdowns, the unexpected is a huge trigger. Now, this next part of the plan relates to you parents, but it's critical. Calming yourself. Trust me, I get it. When your child is having a meltdown in the middle of Target, in the toy aisle, and everyone is hearing the volcanic eruption in aisle 5, staying calm can feel impossible. But if you meet their big emotional chaos with your own, I can promise you the situation is only going to escalate, and it won't be pretty. So take a few deep breaths. Remind yourself that this will pass, and remember, all behavior is communication. You're the model for how your child will eventually learn to handle their own emotions. This might even be where you repeat that helpful mantra over and over. He's not giving me a hard time. He is having a hard time. Remember, their systems, their brain, their wiring, their emotions, all of that is kind of on overdrive, on overwhelm. So what are those steps that we might take? Well, we're going to cover them fast, and we're going to cover them in brief form, but I promise you, you'll be hearing a lot about these in the podcasts ahead. But first of all, it's so important that you validate your child's feelings. As your child goes through a meltdown, it's essential to validate his feelings. It might feel like the last thing you want to do, fearing that if you do, you're just going to be adding more fuel to their fire. And I understand that fear, and it kind of goes against every grain in your body in the moment. But when you acknowledge their emotions, it actually helps them feel understood. And until your child believes that you get it, they aren't going to be moving from their position. So you may say things like, I see you're really upset right now. That's okay. I hear you are really angry at me. That's okay. I understand it doesn't feel fair. It's hard. Maybe you say, I know that would make me upset too. You're showing them with these words that it's okay to feel big emotions. And that's the first step toward helping them regulate, as well as building those connections. Next, I want to remind you to lead with empathy. Meltdowns can test every single bit of your patience, but staying patient is key. I encourage parents I work with to lead with empathy again and again and again. Try to put yourself in your child's shoes. Even if you have to create that quick situation with similarity in your head about a boss or a spouse or a friend, like the one I mentioned earlier with the toothpick or the situation in the car. And it's especially important to remember your child isn't trying to be difficult. They're struggling. Let them know you're there for them and try to understand what they're experiencing. Remember, your child is learning how to navigate these feelings just as you're learning how to navigate helping them through it. Next, I want you to listen and repeat. Listening is powerful. When your child starts to calm down, try active listening. Maybe you repeat what they're saying. Even if it's through tears of frustration, they're going to hear you. You're really mad that we're leaving the park, aren't you? It lets them know that you hear them, and it helps them feel more in control of their emotions. I will warn you now, though, for highly sensitive kids to hear you simply parrot back to them their exact words, such as the broken record approach, you might actually be triggering them. So pay attention to how you might reflect back to your child in effective ways. Now, this is about the time where I start hearing people say, well, aren't you just spoiling your child? Aren't you just spoiling them if you respond to every meltdown? The answer is no. Responding with empathy and calm does not spoil a child. It teaches them how to handle their feelings, respectfully communicate their need, and even learn how to problem solve. You're building emotional regulation skills that they'll need and use for the rest of their life. And hopefully, as you begin to practice a system with your child where they understand and trust what you'll do, they know that you're going to help them learn to respond by communicating their need with words. That's how we move into that. And when you understand your child's needs, then you can make appropriate adjustments. In this way, you're responding and not just impulsively reacting to them. You're learning how to be both flexible and consistent. And when you do this, your child develops trust, knowing that you will consistently show care and address their need. Now, I want to remind you of this important thing. The only person you control is you. So these tools aren't tools for you to control your child. It's easy to feel like you need to control your child's behavior, but the only person you can truly control is yourself. When you focus on controlling your own reactions and responses, you're modeling emotional regulation for your child. It's a powerful example that can help shape how they react in the future. And this is where many parents humbly admit their own struggle with controlling their emotions. So maybe we ought to do some shows on that too. Trust me, you're not alone. Many parents feel that way. And yes, we'll focus on that both in podcasts and we work on that in the coaching program as you learn to figure out your own triggers and your own needs. Every child is different. The way your child processes the world and reacts to stress is unique. As a parent, part of your job is to understand your child's unique wiring, how they respond to that sensory input, knowing what overwhelms them, knowing how they communicate their emotions, and what calms them. That is why it is so key to remember that all behavior, yes, even those messy meltdowns, are communication. Seeing their behavior as communication helps you step in and lead with empathy rather than frustration and anger or the assumption that they're just acting out of defiance or disrespect. So to wrap up today's episode, remember this: meltdowns aren't about bad behavior. They're about communication. Our job as parents is to help our kids develop the skills to manage those big emotions and communicate their needs in healthy ways. God has gifted you with this uniquely wired child, and it is your role to help him grow and learn so he can be all he was created to be and to do. Be sure to grab your Chaos to Calm cheat sheet at parentingwithpersonality.com. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Just remember, you've got this. And on the days you don't, well, we're in this together. Take a deep breath and keep building those heart-to-heart connections. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend who might need it too. And don't forget to connect with us at parentingwithpersonality.com or in our Parenting with Personality Facebook support group. We'd love to continue supporting you there. Until next time, keep calm and parent on.